Welcome back to Mik'd Up. I'm excited to talk to our next guest, Ross Jackson. He has all info regarding New Orleans Saints. If you have not been watching the Saints, this is the perfect person to listen to. He can give you all the information, all the questions that you need answered. The Saints start the season 2-0, first time in 10 years that they started the season 2-0. Ross, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Saints are 2-0. Still a ton of question marks with this team, right? Obviously, you bring in a new quarterback. Michael Thomas hasn't played for a while. He looks like he's kind of catching his stride again. The offensive line seems to be the weakest point right now on the offense. Is Trevor Penning ever going to figure it out? Is it going to be a position change? How do we fix this offensive line?
Yeah, great question, and I think it's kind of one of the biggest questions about this New Orleans Saints early going on their, on this roster so far and for this team is, how are they going to get the offensive line put together and producing well? And I'll tell you, really the thing that makes the most sense is keep giving them reps. I mean, look, They played 64 snaps together the first game. They played 71 snaps together the second game, and those are the only snaps that this group of 5 offensive linemen have ever played together. Even at the end of last year, James Hurst wasn't a starter at left guard. Cesar Ruiz was out for the year at that point. So there's a lot that's changed in this New Orleans Saints offensive line. And these guys, and with no exception, whether it be Trevor Penning or otherwise, they're not going to get better on the sideline. They're not going to get better on the bench. So giving them the reps, doing exactly what they're doing about giving them the opportunity to be out there and learn how to play together and how to be a unit together, that's really the best thing that the Saints can go through right now.
Well, let me ask you this, though, because you look at the first half and you look at the second half, it's two completely separate teams, it feels like, right? The first half, the offensive line is getting pushed around. Derek Carr's not having a lot of time. He's making a couple bad throws. He's getting sacked. They're not moving the ball. Then you go to the second half. He's been sacked one time in the 2 games in the second half. His completion percentage is like 70%. He's throwing touchdowns. He's driving, moving the ball, scoring touchdowns. What's the deal? Like, how does that happen? Why? What is the change? And how come they can't do that early in the game instead of having to wait till halftime?
Yeah, I'm sure that the Saints are asking that question too, right? I mean, that's something that they want to get fixed as well. Derek Carr has said before that, they've done a really good job of just going in there and making good halftime adjustments, being honest about where they are and making those corrections that are necessary during that second half or during halftime to get ready for the second half. But obviously getting out to a faster start would be huge for this New Orleans Saints offense in particular, especially with the way that the defense is playing. I mean, look at how often the defense is getting the ball back in that offense's hands. If they get the opportunity to start to cash in and convert some of those turnovers or convert some of those extra possessions into touchdowns, not just field goals, but touchdowns, we're talking about an entirely different team at this point. And they're winning games in this state right now. So the sooner that they can get that offense rolling and in rhythm early, more quickly, I think the better position this team will be throughout the rest of the season.
Ross, we've talked about it a lot here, but one of the biggest things we've liked so far this season is their ability to win ugly so far. That's kind of something that's not been there over the past couple years. Kind of a 2-part question. What is your biggest surprise so far through to watching them? And what is your biggest sign of optimism on them looking forward throughout the rest of the year?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the biggest sign of optimism, just to start there, is going to be on the defensive side. I mean, this defense has been incredible. Marshall Lattimore has been outstanding. He has a 50% forced incompletion rate right now, which is 7% higher than the guy after him. So, look, I mean, you guys know, right? If you throw at a cornerback and are told there's a 50% chance that ball's not being caught, you're probably not throwing that pass.
Yeah, we done it.
And so that's huge. I mean, he has been lights out, elite so far, and I believe that opponent passer rating when targeting him is under 10 right now, like below 10, like single digits. Like, it's not great. And so I think that what you're looking at right now is a defense that's been outstanding, and I think that that's been the biggest sign of optimism so far. I think my surprise has really been, I could go surprise 2 ways, but I think that my first surprise is that the Saints have not really found a way to show that they've improved as a touchdown scoring team in the red zone, despite the additions, right? Despite what they've done. And what I mean by that is adding a Jamal Williams, who I know is dealing with a hamstring injury right now and is probably going to be out for a little while. They added Jimmy Graham. He hasn't gotten a lot of targets there. They haven't really utilized Taysom Hill in the red zone up until maybe the second half of this game against Carolina. So maybe those things are starting to trend in the right direction, but that is a little surprising to see that they haven't necessarily figured that out yet. On the positive side, though, I will say that play calling as a whole has taken surprising amounts of steps forward. I knew it was going to take steps forward, but I didn't think it was going to be this quick. I like where the Saints are going so far with their play calling. I like the aggression. I like that they're willing to take those shots downfield when they need to seal a game. And this has been a team that so far has had, forgive the phrase, but killer instinct to close out these games here recently. I think that's been a nice surprise, and a surprise in the positive fashion for this team too.
You brought up Taysom Hill, and I brought this question up early in the season, right before the season started, right? Whenever we knew Alvin was going to be out for a few games, and you knew the running back position was going to be kind of light with Kendrick Miller being a rookie, but also kind of been banged up. Mm-hmm. Now with Jamal Williams banged up, my question was, are we going to see Taysom Hill in that running back position or with more carries than he normally would have? Because you're kind of light in the running back, especially in the experienced running back position. And, it seems like when Taysom gets the ball and he runs, it doesn't matter if there's 15 guys on defense. He seems like he's going to get 4, 5, 6 yards a carry. Now with Jamal really out for a few weeks, can you expect to see Taysom maybe get some more carries? Because last week he was the leading rusher with 9 carries and 72 yards.
Yeah, I think so. We asked DA about that, Dennis Allen, the head coach, about that after the game, and about, did you expect to be able to utilize Taysom Hill in that way? And basically Dennis Allen was like, yeah, that's something that we can now add to the way that he's utilized for the New Orleans Saints, as if there's any more slashes to add to this guy's responsibilities, right? But yeah, I do think that that's something that you can continue to lean on if you're the New Orleans Saints, in addition to what he can do for you as a runner from the quarterback position, of course. I don't think it necessarily replaces anything, but I think that it definitely has an impact in terms of how much more often he can be on the field. And now with Jamal Williams out, like you mentioned, they expect Kendrick Miller to be full go next week. Tony Jones Jr. had a really nice showing on Monday night against Carolina, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that backfield allocation for Taysom Hill around where it was against Carolina, or maybe even tick up against Green Bay. I do think that it's an interesting wrinkle, and it's something that forces defenses to find yet another way to defend Taysom Hill from another deployment standpoint. And don't forget, too, that they also utilized Chris Olave as a pass catcher out of the backfield. Yeah. Week 1. Wouldn't be surprised to see that come back as well.
I think it's pretty evident if you've watched a lot of New Orleans Saints footballs through recent history. We can go all the way back to I'll go back to the Marcus Colstons, to the prime Jimmy Graham, if you will, through the Ted Ginn Jr. days, right? Don't get me wrong, Chris Olave is a burner. He can run. Obviously, he's got the deep ball in it. But how big and how huge and how much do you see Shahid's involvement in this offense being able to blossom and open up things like those guys have done in the past?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw that, but Rasheed Shahid actually just ran behind me. He's that fast.
Is he blue?
I mean, look, the guy's a difference maker, right? I mean, he's been huge for this New Orleans Saints team, and not just as I make the joke about him being fast. He's obviously very fast, but to your point, he's way more involved in the offense. He's being utilized in a bunch of different ways. And they're targeting him when they need to put the game to sleep. Yeah. That's big. That's a lot of trust in a guy in his second year. And in a guy that, remember, his first year didn't even get an offseason because he was on that NFI list, still with the injury coming out of Weber State. And so I think that there's I can't give enough praise to how Rasheed Shahid has continued to grow. But in terms of where his sort of trajectory is and the way that he'll be able to continue to be utilized in this offense, because he's such a good route runner, let's leave alone the speed for a second. Because he's such a good route runner, because he sells those vertical stems so well, because he has a lot of subtleties in his breaks, all of those things make him a viable target at every level of the field. Not to mention you can get him involved in the jet sweep game, as a screen receiver, all these other things. So I think watching his role continue to grow has A, been exciting, but B, is kind of this next level gear that the Saints haven't had probably since Ted Ginn Jr., who you mentioned. And just like with you, that's not to take away from Chris Olave's speed, just that who Chris Olave is, and that Chris Olave's role. Rasheed Shahid's a guy that comes in and is kind of giving the New Orleans Saints a complementary player akin to Brandon Cooks, akin to Ted Ginn Jr., like the type of speed receiver that you've been looking to replace for a long time. I think they finally have in a guy like Rasheed Shahid.
It's actually funny watching him, too, because you feel like he's such a prototypical type of Saints guy where it's a no-name guy who they developed, and they take so much pride in doing that there.
Yep.
Nobody even thought about
Yeah,
it.
they love that.
Yeah.
Lloyd.
So continue with the offense real quick. Obviously, you just named off of Rasheed Shahid, what they're doing with Chris Olave. I think the insertion of Michael Thomas, you have what you want on that offensive side of the football. I think he's been an awesome addition it's almost like he feels like he never really missed a step from taking 3 years off.
We miss him.
Yeah, but it would seem with that much time off, he wouldn't be look as polished as he is. If they insert Alvin Kamara into this offense in 2 weeks, do you think that could probably change or maybe even save Pete Carmichael's job at this point? Because it seems like they're still missing something for some reason.
Yeah, I think beyond Pete Carmichael's job, which I think he's done a good job of kind of convincing folks within the organization. Well, I don't know if he had to convince anybody within the organization, but he's made a claim for himself one way or another already at this point. But I think that what Alvin Kamara helps you with is not only does it give you a run game, which forces maybe some of those O-line issues to reduce in terms of attention, because if you have the run game, the defensive line can't just pin its ears back and come after your quarterback anymore, right? So I think that has a big thing. So it potentially it makes the game easier and better for Derek Carr, and that makes your offense run better. It has massive improvement for all of that. Plus, look, the Saints have only targeted position-designated running backs 4 times so far this season for 2 catches for 7 yards through 2 games. That does not sound like New Orleans Saints football, right? So you get Alvin Kamara back, all of a sudden that stat number is changing big time.
In a game.
Another play. Yeah, and that's humongous, right? And so you have, the opportunity at that point to force a defense not only defend you 50 yards down the field with Rasheed Shahid, 40-something yards down the field because Chris Olave can do anything he wants, down the field, in the middle of the field with Michael Thomas, but now you have to defend 20 yards down the right sideline on a wheel route from Alvin Kamara, or 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage on a screen, or all the different ways that they can utilize this guy. And so it really stretches those defenses to not only have to defend vertically, but also defend horizontally, because now they can swing pass out to Alvin Kamara and turn a minus 3 yard pass into a 10-yard gain. Like, that has a huge impact on opposing defenses. So yeah, I think he kind of opens up another level for them.
We're talking a lot about the offense because I think that's been the biggest point of, I guess, the biggest question mark that we've had, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of fans have had offensive line. How's the offense going to be more, explosive and score more points? The defense has been as explosive and dominant as you can be, right? And particularly that defensive line, right? Carl Granderson's got 2.5 sacks the first 2 games of the season. You lose a couple guys, like Peyton Turner's out. He got hurt. Then you lose a couple guys to free agency. Talk about, it just seems like every year you lose a guy, like, oh, no, they're not going to have a pass rusher off the edge. And then someone else steps up and has 10-plus sacks out of nowhere. Talk about the development, of this defensive line and how important it's been to, especially having Cam Jordan stay there as a stalwart, how important it's been to that defense and the consistency that we've seen over the last few years.
Yeah, it's massive, and it has impacts for all 3 levels, right? I mean, when the defensive line is on, which it has been so far this season, I mean, think about this. The Saints were top 5 in sacks last year, which is great, but they were toward the bottom of the NFL when it came to hits on the quarterback, non-sack hits on the quarterback, as well as pressures. The Saints had 34 quarterback hits all of last season. They've got 17 for the first 2 games. Like, they're already halfway to their 17-game pace from last year. So that has a couple of different pieces of impact, right? That means that your pass rush is working, which is great. That's loading up the stat sheet for your pass rush. But it's also making quarterbacks uncomfortable, making them make bad decisions, things like that. It's opening up your opportunities to be able to supplement your pass rush from the second level, right? Demario Davis, big sack last week on Monday night against Bryce Young, and Demario Davis had a pressure right up the middle on the Paulson Adebo interception that Ryan Tannehill threw. And the only reason why Mario Davis was able to cleanly get to the line of scrimmage is because Brian Brzee, the Saints' first-round pick at defensive tackle, cleaned out the entire left half of the offensive line to kind of pave the way for him. So that's your thing, right? The defensive line in that case, just using that play as kind of a microcosm representation of the entire defense, that was a place where your defensive lineman, Brian Brzee, opened up the pathway for your second-level player Demario Davis coming from the linebacker spot, which then created a pressure that turned into an interception for your secondary with cornerback Paulson Adebo. That's the way that the pass rush and sort of the symbiotic nature of a relationship, pressure and coverage. And so I think that when you look at the way that the Saints have been able to not only maintain production from their defensive line, but maybe even, I don't want to say improve production because we're only 2 games in, but certainly start to look that way through the first 2 games. Usually we're waiting for the Saints defense to kind of hit its stride halfway through the season, 4 or 5 games in the season, whatever that might be. The Saints defense, if they haven't hit their stride yet, I feel sorry for the rest of the NFL.
Right.
And a lot of that comes down to what they've been able to do over on the defensive line. And that's, I mentioned Brian Brzee by name, but Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard was really disruptive last week. Those are 2 guys that are also new additions to replace guys that they lost, one of which they played against just this past week in Shy Tuttle. Carl Granderson, as you mentioned, has been excellent. Not only is Carl Granderson a guy that's getting sacks for you, but you've seen this in New Orleans before where they've been near the top of the NFL in sacks but haven't forced fumbles when they get to the quarterbacks.
Yep.
Carl Granderson's getting the ball out. And those are the things that end up changing the way that a defense plays in a way that an offense has to prepare for that defense, and that's been huge for New Orleans so far.
Hey, man. You talk about man, you talk about maintaining production. I don't want to call the man old or nothing, but how the hell is Cam Jordan doing it? This guy's 34 and year a million, and it does not look like he slowed down a step, and he is still doing it. How's he doing it?
I think it's the brand. Well, first of all, because he's an elite athlete, right? Like, I'm not going to try to take anything away from him by trying to give an example. Some of it is that, like, there's a superhuman nature to what he does, right? But the other thing is that I think that the style of pass rusher that he is helps. He's not a speed-dependent pass rusher. He's a powerful pass rusher. He put my good friend Damian Parson, who does our Locked On NFL Draft podcast, he shared a clip of him. The way that Damian put it was, take a look at this clip of Cam Jordan casually walking Taylor Moton into a yoga pose. Like, he did that. and that's who Cam Jordan is and has always been. And so I think that his elite nature as a run defender comes from some of it is experience, just understanding the game, what he's seen before versus what teams are trying to do, things like that. But overall, he's just oftentimes bigger and stronger than the person that's across from him. And you can be 50 years old. Well, not 50 years old, but you know what I mean? Like, look, I'm 33. I am 5'10", 110 pounds coming out of a swimming pool. And if I'm bigger and stronger than somebody else at 50 years old, I'm going to win. Doesn't matter. You know what I mean? What my age is or anything like that. Or more appropriately, if somebody's 50 years old and they're stronger than me, they're going to win. Right. And so Cam Jordan is just stronger. And that's been kind of a big separator for him.
Sticking with the defensive side, obviously it's been, everything you just talked about, the defensive line, it's been very impressive. The Saints finally get the news today of Marcus Maye and the 3-game suspension. Mm-hmm. How do you think they adjusted on the back end of the defense when it's been something that's been playing so well, and you finally had a Marcus Maye, Tyrann Mathieu, kind of everybody healthy and on the same page? What's their next move on the secondary front?
No, great question. I think Marcus Maye, 59% of his snaps so far this season have been as a single high or middle of the field safety. So it could be single high.
DA loves that.
Cover one. Yeah, right. It's either single high cover one or middle of the field in a cover 3 type situation in either case. But the middle of the field deep has been his responsibility. You look at the Green Bay Packers who are on the way. Where do they love to attack? Middle of the field, and oftentimes deep. But they really like the middle of the field, the intermediate area. So that's still Tyrann Mathieu, Pete Werner, Demario Davis territory. Alontae Taylor when he's playing in the slot there as well. So not too terrible. But that's what they're going to have to replace is that middle of the field safety, which sometimes can be the last line of defense. We've seen that twice already to where Marcus Maye has been the last line of defense. Think back to Tennessee, the screen pass that went for 40-plus yards to Derrick Henry. If he doesn't make that tackle, Derrick Henry's in the end zone. And on that same drive, what happened? The Saints defense limited them to a field goal as opposed to a touchdown, right? So that's one of the big things is not only are you looking at a defense that has only allowed one pass to be completed, throwing 20-plus air yards downfield. Marcus Maye's a big part of that. But he's also been a guy that's shown up as your last line of defense, making the big play. And so I think that the Saints have a couple of different ways to go about that. Rookie Jordan Howden is somebody they're extremely confident in, very excited about. He could be a route that they go. JT Gray, who has the most experience in the system, could absolutely be a route that they go. They added a bunch of new safeties, Ugo Amadi, Jonathan Abram, who's on the practice squad, Lonnie Johnson Jr., who has been excellent for them so far. Absolutely. And so there's a lot of different ways that they could go. And there's nothing that says that they only need to go to one of those guys. They could go to different players in different situations, in different down and distance, in different game situations, all those other things. So I think that they have the talent that they need to be able to make up for, I don't want to say replace, right? But help make up for or close the gap in between Marcus Maye and not Marcus Maye. But they may have to play different players in different situations in order to be able to most effectively do that. And certainly there will be some growing pains as well. So don't be surprised if Green Bay connects on a couple of deep passes, things like that. Like that's probably going to happen with Marcus Maye out. Right. But the Saints could also, just to quickly add, they could also do what they did last year and have Tyrann Mathieu play more of the deep safety role and then bring in the replacement safety that's coming in place of Marcus Maye and have them play more of a box safety role down closer to the line of scrimmage. So that's one of the other things that they could do as well.
And that would suit Taysom Hill very well if he wants to go to the other side of the ball.
That's right.
Ross, man, I appreciate your time. Before I let you go, one question. You brought up the Green Bay Packers. If you looked at the schedule before the season started and you saw, we're going to Green Bay. Yeah, you're playing Lambeau, so that's probably an issue. But Jordan Love's a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers isn't there anymore. You're probably going to look at it and say, this isn't going to be that tough of a matchup. Well, the way Jordan Love has started the season has been
lights out.
I mean, there's only one other quarterback in Packers history, and that's Brett Favre. Has thrown 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, first 2 games of the season. What can you expect? What do you expect to see in this game between, I guess, both teams? The line is Saints are it's Green Bay's favored by 2, right, or 2.5. Mm-hmm. What can we expect? Listen, we like to bet on the show. I have not been great in the NFL. I need help. I am going to take New Orleans probably regardless of what you say because I'm a biased bettor. But for everybody else that isn't dumb like me and wants to listen and be educated on this thing, what can we expect out of this game with the Saints going up to Lambeau? Because I think that they have kind of moved past that reputation of, they can't play out of the dome on the road. I think they've been one of the best road teams over the last 3 or 4 years in the NFL. So what can we expect this weekend?
So the Saints haven't allowed more than 20 points to an opposing team so far for 10 straight games. Wow. 11 of the last 12, right? So that's a franchise record for them, and that's the longest active streak. I think this next active streak is like 2 at the moment. So that's something that I would point out. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. And the way that I look at this one is that if you're somebody that's looking to bet on this game, this might be a really good live betting game for you as opposed to a game that you bet now for later. The reason why I mention that is because if you trust the New Orleans Saints defense to limit this Green Bay Packers team to 20 or fewer points, you might wait to see how the New Orleans Saints offense is looking early and then make your decision based on that. If they come out and they're a little flat-footed again or they're playing behind the 8 ball or whatever for their opening drive or maybe their first 2 drives, then maybe that educates you on where you think they might be able to combat with that relative to how many points you expect this New Orleans Saints defense to allow. But maybe this is a better live betting game than something to bet on now for later.
Does Christian Watson being back, does that concern you at all? Because he's a huge deep threat for them. He's a guy that's going to go over the top, especially with Marcus Maye out.
Yeah, I think he's somebody that could be that guy. Like if they're going to have any of those big deep completions without Marcus Maye in the lineup, he's probably that guy. And watch out for Romeo Doubs as well. Jaden Reed's another home run hitter. I mean, they have some good weapons there over on that wide receiver side. But what I will mention is that they still have to compete, whether Marcus Maye is on the field or not. They still have to compete with Marshawn Lattimore. Yep. They still have to compete with Paulson Adebo. And Alante Taylor, although he's allowed a considerable amount of catches, that's not out of the ordinary for a slot receiver to allow catches. He hasn't allowed big plays to develop after the catch. Right. So as long as these guys are able to make these stops at the catch point or force Jordan Love deeper into his progressions, it eliminates the deep ball opportunities. So that's something I would be watching out for in this one. It seems likely, though, that if anybody is going to be the guy, it would be Christian Watson. But look, if he's lining up across from Marshawn Lattimore, let's say 60% of his snaps, you'll take that as a Saints fan.
Yeah, no doubt. Ross, man, I appreciate your time. I'm sorry I kept you a little longer than we wanted to, but this is great. We'd love to have you on as much as you want to come on. We're going to talk Saints. We talk Saints every week, so we appreciate it. Thanks for the insight, and looking forward to having you back on the show.
Tell Shahid slow down.
Absolutely, guys. I'm here for you anytime that you need. Yep, take care, stay safe, and I look forward to talking to you again here soon.
All right, man. Appreciate you.
I got you.